Morning.
Hello. So it feels a bit like Boston, not as crowded, but almost as nice. But it's welcome to the session in the Open Infrastructure Summit here. It's good to have like energetic and great Open Infrastructure Summit again. This session will be about digital public infrastructure, how governments are really using open source and open source clouds to really build out their public services to their citizens. And we'll share a bit. I mean, we've been working on that topic during the last years, and we'll share a bit how that's going. Well, let's start introducing ourselves. Karsten, why don't you?
My name is Karsten Samaschke. I'm CEO of a VanillaCore company around open source infrastructures, and we are in 2025, obviously in AI, right? Needs to be. Other than that, I'm the assembly lead of GovStack, and I will explain a little bit about that as we go. Good.
Garloff, I've been doing open source for my professional life, Linux kernel, Linux development at SUSE, and then since 2011 doing OpenStack. And San Francisco 2012 was my first summit. I think there's like a bragging competition in some of the conversations I've had over here. So it's been rather early on. Felt some of the pain of using the early on software, but it's been maturing nicely since. So happy to do that. And well, the last few things I've done, I've been building out the Open Telecom Cloud as chief architect, and then for the last 5 years working on sovereign cloud stack, which will be touched upon in this presentation. I run my own company, S7n Cloud Services, where I provide support for creating, implementing clouds, and well, making partners that run clouds successful with it. So, why digital sovereignty and open source? Well, we feel it's fitting together really naturally and really nicely, and that's why this nice picture was created.
Using AI, excuse me.
Okay, so we spend a bit of extra energy.
Yes, absolutely.
Well,
Destroy the planet.
well, not just yet. Hopefully we'll help the planet a bit as well. The fact that digital sovereignty and open source actually fit together well is actually not just an observation we have, but there's also Amandeep Singh Gill, who is the UN Secretary General Envoy for Technology, who said just that in his keynote in the 2024 OSPOS for Good conference. So this was like a conference where a few hundred open source enthusiasts and contributors and organizations were invited to New York City last summer, not this year. Well, this year summer actually again, but I didn't go because it's a country that is becoming more difficult to travel to if you're outspoken on sovereignty. So I didn't dare to go, to be honest.
Imagine living there.
So the good news is I'm here. Maybe I wouldn't be here if I tried to go there, right?
We've been there 90 years ago.
Yeah. Oh, jeez.
But I mean, what he says, he really has the observation that openness is what is helping to empower people, to empower countries to have their own way to go about digitalization. And this is actually something that he thinks is linked to a democratic way of doing IT. Having everybody have access, having everybody the ability to study, to learn, to adjust, to share, and to collaborate. And I mean, this is what has been driving a lot of the open source enthusiasts, including myself, for years to do what we do. And it's kind of great to see that at the highest levels of the United Nations this has been recognized. And I mean, the crowd of more than 400 participants in New York City certainly was agreeing to that as well. So that's what we base our work on, and we took a lot of inspiration and energy from that conference.
Right. So one of the things that United Nations and a few other of the development organizations are currently heavily emphasizing upon is, and come back to that, digital sovereignty. Digital sovereignty is basically ensured using tools that run in your country. The GovStack initiative that I'm basically working with is basically around enabling countries to actually digitalize their services towards the citizens, trying to move away from locked in kind of environments, literally on multiple levels, towards an open and towards a citizen-centric kind of ecosystem. And that beautifully aligns with open source as well as with the concepts of enabling and empowering countries themselves. GovStack itself is an initiative which is basically powered by a lot of organizations, and the idea is basically to have multiple building blocks in place. All of those building blocks are, first of all, specifications, right? So when you basically read about those specifications, as a country, you will be able to procure things, to start procurement processes. It's very boring, but it's like the way how countries work, right? They don't buy things, they procure them. They have their tenders, and then organizations and companies can basically apply to them. And GovStack itself is a bunch of like foundational and build upon blocks then. We call them building blocks. And these building blocks basically want to allow a country to define its own destiny, to define its own way of shaping the digital services. So at its core, it's just a bunch of specifications, as I already mentioned. The countries themselves, they are allowed and they are basically asked to choose themselves which kind of services do they want to implement, in which way, on which kind of platform. So what we have there at its utter core is vendor neutrality. And when we talk about open source, we know that it's basically around neutrality from that perspective. You want to be able to interchange things. You want to be able to choose things, right? So that is what is embraced with GovStack as well. That we basically give countries the freedom to, choose what they want to do. If they want to go FOSS, OSS, or what have you, check, they can do that. If they want to go the commercial route, well, they can do that as well. Very importantly, all of that is then supposed to either be run in a country or in an environment the country chooses, right? Ideally, it runs within the country, adding to digital sovereignty, adding to freedom themselves. But obviously, it can also run in United Nations data centers or any feasible public or private cloud environment, including hyperscalers, if you wanted to, because it's again about choice, and it's again about freedom. Sovereign cloud stack, though, and that is where Kurt comes into the game, is then in the end the foundation for GovStack on literally the foundational level, because all of the components need to run somewhere, right? And that is where sovereign cloud stack comes into the game.
Okay, I'll take over. So when we built sovereign cloud stack, and that's the reason why it was such a good match for GovStack. I mean, we thought hard about what digital sovereignty means, and it was not just thinking, but we talked to constituents in the IT industry and asked them, well, what is it you need? What is it you require when you want to have like a platform that you can trust, that you consider that you have sufficient control over, or where you don't have like dependencies that you might find out are very painful. So we listened to those companies and got a lot of things they expected and wanted, and in the end we were able to kind of sort them into 4 different buckets, and then we kind of built this hierarchy or this structure or this taxonomy, if you want, that describes what is part of digital sovereignty. And then those 4 levels where we kind of put in all of those requirements are data sovereignty. That is actually what most people talk about most of the time. Having the ability to control where your data is stored and who has access to that, who has access to the metadata, whether you can decide with whom you share it, or maybe some foreign governments decide that for you. So that is extremely important, obviously. On the second level, we've heard a lot, well, we want to have choice. We don't want to have a dependency on a single vendor, on a single implementation. So having the ability to choose between providers, but then even actually once you made a choice, also have the ability to switch. So it's not just like a one-time choice and then you invest a lot of energy into automating and restructuring your workload so it fits to that cloud. But once you've done that, you still want to have that choice, so you don't have the lock-in after the first choice. So that is important. The third kind of things we heard a lot was technological sovereignty. I think is the headline a lot of people think or use to describe this. This is really the ability to have like an understanding how that technology works, to have the ability to study it, to analyze it, to change it according to your needs, and to contribute to how this technology further evolves. So you actually can have innovation on that technology without having to ask for permission. And on the fourth level, if you want to have like a broad set of providers that provide that technology to you, or you maybe want to actually do it in-house and host your own cloud infrastructure, you want to have the ability to do so. And one of the hurdles to do that is actually to have the skills to operate such a cloud. Getting it to work is one thing. It's not always easy. If you are experienced, you can do it fairly well. But then also building up the experience, having the staff that knows how to operate it, can be quite difficult. So sharing operational knowledge, making that available, is like the fourth level that really enables you to do it yourself as well. And that was really the motivation for a lot of the work we did. We published kind of that taxonomy in even a scientific journal. It's available on the Cloud Report. DoD is the scientific journal. And if you kind of want to have the really, really short version of it, the Cloud Ahead article that is linked here, we will share slides so you can see the links. The Cloud Ahead article is like the very short version of it. And of course, based on that understanding what our IT partners need and want for their customers, we created certifiable standards that helps you with the provider switching very obviously. So we standardize what APIs need to exist, respond in what way, and then on the second level where we talk about technological sovereignty, we talk about open source. So there's a reference implementation that does fulfill all those requirements, all those standards. And then on the third piece we deliver is operational knowledge. So we make that available, we share it, we have like meetings where that's shared, we build a documentation page where we have a lot, and really establish some exchange between providers. That's been maybe the hardest discussions we've had, because the fact that you develop code together in an open source model and share is something that's now been established for many, many years in the IT industry. Sharing operational knowledge is not something that people traditionally have done.
They often want to avoid that.
So some companies consider that knowledge as their crown jewels, and I can understand why they think that way. At the same time, if you want to build a strong network of providers that can compete, even if not just the largest ones can actually be successful, but smaller ones as well, you need to have that kind of collaboration as well. So we have actually a webpage, openoperations.org, where we have kind of written a manifesto how we want to do that and what we believe in will help. Quick look at what the reference implementation looks like from an architectural perspective. So that's kind of the reference architecture. Nothing really in there that would surprise anyone, I guess. We have some hardware management tools, which you need to make sure you can automate the hardware deployment. We have infrastructure as a service, or the virtualization layer, where we virtualize compute, storage, network. On top of that, we manage many Kubernetes clusters, so it's really like a Kubernetes cluster building as a service kind of approach. So we don't believe in sharing Kubernetes clusters between customers, just customers get their own. Many customers use many of them actually for various purposes. So creating clusters and lifecycle managing them is a key skill you need to have. And then also having the tools around that you need to do operations, lifecycle management, monitoring, trending, logging, are all things that cloud providers need to build, and we have like pieces in the architecture and in the reference implementation that do that as well. And then on the other side, the identity management obviously is something you need to do as well. And if you believe in the vision we have of creating like a network of providers, one of the things we want to do is have the ability to do federation. So we want to make it easy for our users to consume not just one cloud, but several clouds. and not do like the user management separately on each cloud, but federate the users and the identities. Talking about what we have, obviously we want to not just have like the specification and the standards out there, but we also want to prove that it can be implemented with the reference implementation. And actually, we've had partners we worked with successfully. So we have now like more than half a dozen of cloud providers in Europe that are using that technology to provide cloud services to either as a private cloud or as public clouds. But importantly for the GovStack context, it's been rolled out now, or there's preparations for rolling out, I should say more correctly, in various countries in Africa, Asia, and also in America.
Not in every part of America.
So we're really looking very, very much forward to that. Well, I mean, in the United States would be kind of nice, but I don't think that's going to happen quickly. There's some incumbents there that won't love that, I guess.
I would think so.
And the reason really that this is happening is that digital sovereignty matters to the people, to the customers of those cloud providers, so they avoid vendor lock-in, achieve the levels of sovereignty. And actually, we've been traveling a bit through Africa, Karsten, much more than I did, but we heard a very clear feeling that they still remember the times when they were like colonies and people tried to impose on them whatever, which they didn't appreciate. So they are very wary and want to avoid to be in that situation again. So having like their own way to do it is something they very much like. If you've been to a talk earlier today, I've taken like just this picture. The United Nations is also engaged and supports with building infrastructure using that technology that empowers nations and provides digital sovereignty to them.
So I now take over again. So the thing is, when you just look at the principles of how we work with GovStack as well as Sovereign Cloud Stack, and frankly, many other projects involved there. It's not just like the 2 projects and initiatives, right? But like, if you just look at them, it's basically probably, apart from a slight change in wording, assembly developed in public versus software developed in public, it is the exact same kind of mindset that we have. It is the exact same kind of approach that we have. We want to have everything open. The development, the assembly, the documentation, the source codes, obviously, and everything else around it, including all of the automation. Because we feel, again, that at the core of everything needs to be openness and enablement to everyone and every organization in every country involved. One thing before I go to the next slide, allow me to go back like just a few slides. Sorry, that was not, we did not discuss that. But Kurt mentioned, we do have like a lot of Kubernetes clusters, right? Because we don't want to share these things. Kurt mentioned that very briefly. Just want to touch upon that from a GovStack's perspective. That is exactly the model that we chose for security, right? Individual Kubernetes clusters, individual clusters, separate infrastructures, yet on the same platform. That's the way you can roll out such things on a country level, right? We're not talking about small communities, we are talking about whole countries in the end. But it's the same principles that you would apply on the level of an organization, right? So again, it scales beautifully. And Kurt already mentioned that, it's utterly important to learn those things. Digital sovereignty and actually also the open source kind of mindset, they need to be learned. Open source, you know that, I know that. But open source is not just about consuming, right? Open source is about contributing back. It's about community, building together, which very much resonates with the countries that we basically work within. And not just us working within, but like the whole organization. But equally as important is that we need to skill the people, the humans. That is actually, I know you guys are very much into OpenStack and those kind of infrastructures. So you know that like the learning curve is pretty challenging, right? So we need to foster that knowledge. We need to get the people on the ground, literally on the ground, into that kind of knowledge. Even the smallest of countries should be able to at least decide to take that fate of their digital sovereignty into their own hands, rather than having it to outsource somewhere, where you would then again be in the hand of a vendor who is then probably controlled by a American or Chinese government. But that's not just them, right? It's the same with Europe and what have you. From the perspective of all of those countries, they want to be in control themselves. And that is what we try to achieve.
I mean, there's nothing as empowering as understanding how things work and be able to do things yourself, right?
Exactly, exactly. And that is why, again, when we do things, when we travel the world, I mean, it's not for fun, to be honest. You get to many, many pretty poor countries. But you have the same kind of willingness to learn there. You have the same kind of enjoyment when things are starting to progress. So what we do, we outsource and we open source, probably outsource all of the documentation and, for example, also training material. Kurt and me, for example, we have been to Kenya in May, and we did one of the advanced workshops there. We have basically different levels of workshops that we do, and we do like we did the advanced workshops there, where we went really deep into things, where we really nerded out on cloud. You see that on the left picture, where we basically, in the end, not just gave an overview of how open source works and how cloud fundamentals are to be perceived like, but where we really, really went deep into what Kurt already mentioned, the knowledge of rolling it out, but more importantly, the knowledge of how to maintain these things. As one of the Rancher guys said years ago, before they have been purchased by SUSE, so you rolled out Rancher, so what, right? Rolling out is the cheapest part of that. Maintaining it is a big challenge, and that is, again, where our open source community, our open source approaches can make a difference between having a country which falls back into some vendor's kind of clause, or where they can basically sustain their own future themselves, right? So that is utterly important there. So we've been, for example, to Kenya, to Djibouti, to Eswatini. There are more countries on the African continent on the roadmap, but also, and I'm really looking forward to that, for example, something in the Caribbean. I'm not sure if I ever come back from that trip, but that's a different thing. But also, it is embraced, Kurt, you can continue. It is embraced.
Before we do that, I will jump one slide back, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. Go back.
Because one of the things that I wanted to say here, because I think that's also not always the case. You don't find a lot of training material that's public. So we created that for the Kenya training. Some we created live, and some we improved after we did the training.
We really nerded out there.
It's a living document, and ITU was paying for that, which is really nice to have the creation paid, and they agreed to us publishing it under an open source license. So it's available on GitHub under Creative Commons license, which is really making it available for the broader community. So you can use that material to self-study, to prepare maybe for training.
There's no secret in there, right?
Which
so
is nice.
Just use it.
And GIC was actually paying for the training itself that happened, which is also nice. So it doesn't make anyone rich, but at least we get the trip some of the time paid. Sorry for jumping in here.
No, fine. So this one, what I just wanted to say is with that knowledge. Let's be honest. A country of Kazakhstan is probably not like the core of a democratic country. Don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. They are a republic. But obviously, if you look at it from a French perspective, or even from a German perspective, you might have different understanding of what democracy is. Nonetheless, what we try to achieve there, and what Kazakhstan, for example, as one of the examples of the countries that we are working with, is trying to achieve, is to embrace their own future. They go their own way. They do that 100% based upon open source, right? So they, for example, want to become a fully digital nation within 3 years. And that is like an outspoken side from the president of the country. What they already achieved is that more than 90%, 92% of all services are available online. They basically shifted towards that completely based upon open source stacks. And the great thing then from a GovStack perspective again is they are willing to contribute back, right? Kazakhstan, for example, invested a lot into analytical stuff based upon open source. Big data, ETL and what have you, just to make sure that data flowing into the system can basically be processed near real time, which is very, very important again on a country level. And it's also very important to prevent fraud and other malicious activities, right? So that is basically where Kazakhstan, for example, excels. They invested a lot there. And interestingly, they are working based upon OpenStack as well. It's the same underpinning, right? Not necessarily a sovereign cloud stack, but we are working on that as well. But at least OpenStack, right? So they embrace the openness of the system. They have created their own knowledge, and they are, it's just one of many countries. They are contributing back. They are actively working in the working groups to share the knowledge and to create frameworks that are actually repeatable across multiple nations. Even though every nation, every country has its own kind of approach to this. So open source is basically at the core of what they do, and that basically allows us to conclude our talk. And we have an Easter egg here in the room. So if you find that person depicted on the image, you can smile at her. That was too obvious. You looked just recently. But what you see is basically, and what we try to give you as a message, is that digital sovereignty and open source, they require each other. You can't do one without the other. And the technologies that we are using, sovereign cloud stack, the GovStack building blocks, implemented in open source products, the assembly of those things, they all contribute to work. The countries in the end are not colonialized.
Yes.
I'm working on that. Colonized, thank you. By other countries, where they can shape their own future and make informed decisions, right? That is what we, in the end, and ultimately want to achieve. And all of that based upon what we do here, what we talk about here, and what has been developed and contributed